activist, but what do you say to your critics?
Again, you're being an activist. I am
not. That's not appropriate, sir.
Who are you with? What's your name?
That's not an appropriate question for you to ask.
You're going to ask how many questions? You get 3?
What a stupid son of a bitch.
Good morning, Liberty lovers, Liberty curious, and anyone else tuning in to Friendly Fire. If you're watching live, then let me especially thank you for tuning in so early. The show is dedicated to interviewing and discussing libertarian candidates running for office, and only libertarian candidates. As the name suggests, candidates maybe ask tough questions, but as a fellow libertarian, I'm not here to make them look foolish or fail. I'm simply raising the bar for how we interview and see our candidates and the expectation that we hold for them. The Libertarian Party is the third largest political party in the United States and the only viable option to compete with the big two. Now, I want to apologize for yesterday morning. I had some audio issues and I was unable to run a stream. The conversation that I wanted to have, well, not conversation, but the show that I wanted to have, I will delay it because I have invited Tub Rorabaugh. You may know him as goodness, tongue-tied here. I invited Tub Rorabaugh to come on the show with me and discuss not only his campaign, but also some of the latest events. Anybody that's been on social media yesterday knows that out in Arizona, we had somebody drop out of the race, a libertarian, and endorse a Republican. Created a huge furor. I myself was not very happy with that. So we'll be discussing not so much the candidate, and we're not going to really get into this back and forth on the people and whether this person or that person was right or wrong necessarily. But I want to talk about how we look at our candidates, how we look at our party, and kind of just discuss some of the arguments in favor of this kind of move, whether or not it's a good strategic move. And, basically, the way I see it, everything has a trade-off. So we're going to talk about the trade-offs to the best of my ability, or to the best of our ability today. And in addition to having Tab on, I also invited Hector Roos, who is running for governor of Florida. And so we're going to, first off, we're going to discuss their run and race and just kind of check in with them, see how they're going, because as you know, it's the second. So we've got 6 more days and then we're going to vote. So let's go ahead and bring both of those two gentlemen in right now. Gentlemen, good morning. How are you?
Hey, there he is.
Yeah, good morning. Look, there he is. Yes.
I was wondering, are you going to have us on here to debate each other? Is that what we're doing here?
Right. So I was thinking that maybe I need to move myself and get in between you guys just in case. Yeah. So I've moved me. Now I'm in between just in case you guys get out of control. So, so let's check in on your race and let's see how things are going, gentlemen, whoever wants to kind of give it a go first.
Go ahead, Hector.
Sure. Listen, I appreciate the opportunity again, DL, for being here. Tub has been just a wonderful breeze of fresh air into the life of the Libertarian Party of Florida, into the campaign as my running mate. We've but between the two of us, we've trekked quite a bit of territory around we're the 5th largest state in the country. Mm-hmm. So and certainly the 3rd most populated. We've been through hurricanes. We've been through obviously a lot of ups and downs in regards to not getting into the debate. These questions of really the core values of the Libertarian Party and really the Libertarian message. We've been talking about it with tens of thousands of people. Honestly, I can't imagine a better time to be a Libertarian, because we're the ones who are speaking truth to power, and ultimately it's not, if anybody wonders what is a Libertarian superpower, it's literally just that, truth telling. And I'll tell you one thing. If it wasn't for the platform that we have, there'd be no ability for libertarians to even argue into what's actually been happening in Florida. And to just summarize, really what's been going on. I said recently, just now about the Hurricane Ian, and really it was one of the most unfortunate episodes in they'll go down as one of the most unfortunate episodes in Florida history as possibly the deadliest hurricane in 100 years. Why? Because you can't trust government with your security, and ultimately, a lot of people were waiting waiting for the local government and the state government to tell them, hey, it's time to evacuate. And unfortunately, they were given less than 24 hours to do so before the weather would make it impossible to do so. And then, of course, we've heard about the different stories out there. Ron DeSantis claiming that he didn't lock down the state at all, and the media joining him in that chorus. Of course, Florida has had lockdown. It still has persistent mandates for mask and vaccines in our hospital systems, in the public hospital systems, and even Florida has been the fourth biggest loser of small businesses in America as a result of the policies of lockdown for the following years. I mean, these are real numbers, and we're in a cost of living crisis as it is. So property insurance is out of control in the state of Florida. It's basically the private industry has collapsed. People have to actually, in other words, there's no recourse in the private sector for affordable property insurance, because we have this massive monopoly that the politicians in Tallahassee have no desire to rein in, and people want to hear why. They want to hear what's the solution. They want to hear, and ultimately we just have to deregulate these spaces. We have to open it up to the market again. We include so much regulatory morass for the property insurance industry, for most insurance industries actually, that requires them to participate in basically an emergency reinsurance fund, and in doing so, they have to actually commit to the types of policies they offer that are expensive. And at the end of the day, people complain about Obamacare. Why did Obamacare have all these extra bells and whistles? The same thing happened in the state government too. And now, and we were basically the fraud capital of the country, with a number of hurricane strikes over the years. And the problem is that it became a very brittle system. And it's basically collapsing around us. Inflation has been a big problem too, because it's hit us in every sector, especially energy. Property taxes are going up, and wages aren't following suit, by the way. So people really have to make a hard decision this year about whether they continue thinking that home ownership is a possibility, even if they already own their home, whether they can keep it. So this is really the issues that matter. At the end of the day, we see a couple small examples of fraud and abuse. Like Ron DeSantis doing this, really vilifying immigrants. And we're libertarians. We are a pro-immigrant party. We recognize that that free markets do include the movement of labor freely across borders. And the question of him instituting policies that are close to a rendition, but more or less a relocation of immigrants from one state to another to make political points using taxpayer funds, has been challenged. We've challenged him, at least I've challenged him on that regard, that it's been illegal and it's a farce, and it's just simply covering up more of the problems that I described earlier that most Floridians are facing. And so, like I said, we're in a position to tell the truth, and it doesn't matter if it's Ron DeSantis or Charlie Crist that are lying to the public, or gosh, even so-called libertarians who are supporting Ron DeSantis, or for that matter, Charlie Crist. At the end of the day, we talk about bodily autonomy as well, and when we talk about the drug war. And of course, being anti-lockdowns, Charlie Crist just basically said that he would lock down the state again. He would put everybody on like aggressive masking, like before, and even vaccine masking. But to tell you the truth, the Charlie Crist of the world, who's the Democrat candidate for governor here in Florida, and Ron DeSantis is the incumbent Republican, their policies are very similar. There's really not that much daylight between them, except in degrees of stupidity. So that's or more of the same, in other words. And I say this being measured because I know that Tubb has a lot of things to add himself. I look forward myself to actually a couple quick announcements. Obviously, I'll be participating in CannaFest this weekend, where I'll be on a panel on Sunday around midday.
That kind of participation. Gotcha.
Right, and ultimately, I looks like I'm about to announce formally that I'm going to be holding the only Spanish language debate with the other candidate that's running. There's 4 candidates running for governor, and there's an NPA candidate called Carmen Jimenez. And I'll be doing a debate with her on Friday in Miami, with details to come. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, hey, Tub.
All right,
How we
Tub.
doing?
So why didn't
So
y'all invite
I got a
me
question,
down
Tub.
why wasn't I invited down to the Hispanic with the Spanish speaking?
It's been just confirmed, and of course, I'm about to tell. Just confirmed.
So,
Like,
so,
I'm not,
so you don't need me at that one? Is that what you're saying? You got it covered?
brother, we're 6 hours apart. So if you want to come make it, you're more than welcome. But
Yeah,
then
I think
I'm rushing
lack
up to
of knowing
Canifest after that.
The lack of knowing Spanish is what will cause the issue, not the hours and distance. So, all right. So,
Sure.
DL, what do you
Just
have
pretend.
for me?
I just want to ask you. Okay, so he gave us the rundown, and is he correct? Did he get it all right? Or I mean, I got you separated, so you're good. So if you need to disagree with him, it's okay.
So I'm saying is now is my time. If I'm going to disagree,
Right.
this is it. Is on
And
your
you're 6
show,
hours
this is
apart,
the time.
no less. So
No,
we've got some
what's
distance
funny?
here from you guys, and now you're 6 hours apart. We're good.
Yeah, so we're fine. No, actually, what's funny is that so when we started talking about whether I would come on board and help and kind of get involved with the race, one of my biggest concerns was, okay, well, what am I going to do? Because as you know, I've had a pretty active local campaign for city council here in town.
Right.
And that's been up and running. And so part of my concern was, okay, well, wait a minute, how do I help? Because I've really been focused, here as opposed to statewide. And then I kind of realized, hey, you know what? The same things that we want here are probably the same things they want all throughout Florida. And so you kind of take that same thinking, just go, okay, now go do it everywhere. So with that, Hector and I kind of agreed that let's kind of split the state a little bit. And so I've actually been going out also and just hitting a lot of the affiliates that are around. And it's good to see that there is a level of excitement. You know what I'm saying? We got a lot of work still to do as libertarians, especially statewide offices.
Right.
And this has been kind of what I've focused on a little bit through this, because I've been kind of saying that Hector hits things at a macro level and I hit things at a micro level. And that's actually why we're working together pretty well, honestly. And so as I've been going around to the affiliates, I think that what I'm finding, like I said, is there's a level of excitement. There's been people reaching out and saying, hey, I'm voting for you. And to see those type of things where people are excited about voting instead of just, well, I guess I have to go vote. You know what I'm saying? We're basically trying to get them away from the lesser of two evils. Like, you know what? Let's give them somebody they can actually be happy about to go and vote for.
The lesser of three evils.
Yeah. No, listen, friendly fire is one thing, but to just be outright mean and disrespectful is unnecessary. All right. So, like you said, so it's been seeing, I've been seeing this across the state. What I think we need to do is you've heard me mention that we have to get the affiliates. We have to get affiliates a little more active. We have to get more affiliates, period, if we're going to be effective in running these statewide offices. We're going to have that infrastructure in place to really help move things forward. But for now, I think that we just keep using what's already there, and it seems to be going in a pretty positive direction.
That's awesome. And I'm trying out different layouts here because, I've never had more than one guest on here. So I'm like, oh, there's new buttons for me to push. So I hope I'm not too distracting to anybody. But no, I agree. And you know what? I think it's really refreshing to have both of you guys on, and then especially to say, all right, here's what we've been doing, right? Like, and I know that you have been out at the affiliates. We've got an affiliate that has had ups and downs next to us here in Duval. So the Clay County affiliate, they've had some ups and downs, and you've been out there working really hard to get them back up and running. So affiliated, because here in Florida, we have like 67 counties and we have like 21 affiliates.
21.
Right. That's unacceptable. We need more than that. And there's no one or two people to point the finger at, right? This is a kind of a case where, hey, if you see something that needs to be done, just get in and start doing it. And that's one of the things that you've done here locally, just to, our neighbors here, and say, hey, let me come over and help you guys get organized, because it benefits me as a candidate. Because, when you're running at a statewide level, you need the affiliates to be able to support you, whether that's through votes or donations or promotion, whatever the case may be. Those are the kind of things that you need. And then they need, members over there need an affiliate stood up, right? They need an active and running affiliate.
And I also understand that, like, by us getting active affiliates, in all honesty, it's not going to help our election. Like, it's just not going to happen in the next
Right. Yeah, not right now.
Well, I think that what we're trying to do is move the party forward as a whole. past Hector and I. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? And so even working with the Clay County, next county over, and work with their affiliate, it's more about, it's not just about Hector and I and these things. It's about, hey, listen, what about the next ones? What about the next ones? It's not like just Dennis Misa going now. It's like, how do we as a state start moving all of this forward? I think it's going to take just that. It's going to take those affiliates coming together. And maybe some of us who have a bit of a voice inside the party have to get involved in that. We have to seriously take that on. And maybe even Hector and I, after all of this craziness is done, we look into that and we use the little bit of influence that we maybe have gained to use for that direction.
Right. And I think that's absolutely correct. We have to start thinking long term and say that would be low time preference for all those nerds out there. But we got to start thinking long term and say, okay, it's not just about the election coming up in November, right? There's more to it than that. And this is one of the reasons why I supported you guys running for governor, lieutenant governor. You know, it's not because I was like, man, they're totally going to go in there and just sweep and they're going to get like 90% of the vote. You know, like I didn't think of it that way. I thought of it like there are a lot of components. One, we should be running candidates, period. I mean, there are a lot of states that fight for ballot access. We don't have to have that fight. We shouldn't squander it, right? We should be running candidates. Number two, candidates build upon candidates. You know, so if we don't have anybody running for, 6-7 years, which I think it's been longer than that. I think Adrian Wiley ran away, 2014. If we're not running candidates, then who are we building off of? We're going to try to build off this race off of Adrian Wiley's race. Like that's a long time to have. A lot of things have changed since then. So what we need is a race now. And then next governor race, we need another candidate running for governor, another set of candidates running governor, lieutenant governor.
I think he just kicked us out, Hector. I think he just made it very clear. It's not us.
Well, okay. What I'm saying is somebody needs to build off of it. Hector, you're muted. I didn't do it.
I was going to say, it sounds like DL's is recruiting himself for the role.
No,
is that what it is? Oh, he's self-proclaiming.
Definitely not. No, but I think that's like, whether it's you guys, whether it's somebody else.
Oh, too late. You already kicked us out.
Ay, caramba. So, but you build off of it, right? And you look at their successes, you look at their failures, and you look at what they did, and you say, all right, I'm going to do a little bit better. And I think that's the big value in having candidates run and then consistently run. Not only that, it gives motivation. Just like Tub was saying, he's like, people are excited. They're like, oh, I have an option, right? Well, that one person today becomes two persons, tomorrow, and then that builds as well. Now, how long does it take to build until you have a formative army behind you? I don't know. And it takes a lot of successes and a lot of failures, right? Like this is really, at the end of the day, it's basically the same thing as market, right? You have losses and you have wins.
Well, just to point out, the number has been given to me 23 years since anybody in the state has had 3 partisan choices for Libertarian on their ballot. And that's true in at least 2 counties in Volusia and Pinellas, who also have congressional candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So, and frankly, the entire state is blessed to have 2 Libertarian candidates to vote for on the first page as the first questions.
Right.
Which is U.S. Senate with Dennis Vistagoy and us, myself and Tub on the governor ticket. These are things that are actually historic. And this was and rather than, we have to accept, when they say accept the small wins, we have to recognize that those are the small wins. Giving people choice is the first time for the first time potentially in their lifetimes, because if 20 plus years is actually a long time for people to be able to say they have that kind of choice.
This is an opportunity to take what, even as DL is very clearly pointed out, as a loss for us. Like he's fully saying that, hey, you guys suck, and this is where you're going to be. But here's the thing: is in all reality, I've told people when I come across him, he's like, hey, it's against Ron DeSantis. Like I get that, and I understand that he's like a little G God for Florida. But I tell everybody, I said, listen, you have to understand that for us, it's about getting involved. It's about getting a voice out there, so that even though I don't think we have any false aspirations of taking over the governorship. Like I think we're realistic about this, but I think that in our loss, we can find the wins.
Right.
And I think that that's where we're at. I think that even as a party, even though I believe we should be past some of these things by now, we have to take where we are and start moving forward. And I think that that's what we do here. We take some losses to take the wins to go along
Right.
with it.
Well, I
Right.
mean,
Absolutely.
it's the win conditions, right? What are our victory conditions? I want people to, it's very important to remember that why libertarians run in the first place. I mean, I like to say, I'm not even sure where I first heard this, but basically, there is expression, if voting could change things immediately, then it'd be, they'd ban it. Honestly, the politicians and the political
I
establishment
saw
would
that
ban
just
voting.
yesterday,
It
actually.
would. I mean that exactly. It's not. I mean, we say it, but the reality is that this is true. So libertarians are winning not because we're not because we are winning at the polls, getting 90%. No, nobody gets 90% unless you're communists. But the reality is, it comes down to very simple. We are communicating ideas. We're changing hearts and minds. There's nothing that proves that to change society more than changing the culture by influencing the culture. That's where we win. So when we take stands and principled stands, we say this is how you should identify libertarianism. That's where we're at. I mean, this
Right.
is without taking anything away from what anybody else would say. I simply posit that that every time that Tubb speaks, every time I speak, even every time you speak, DL, we're doing more. We're doing more to influence the society in a libertarian direction, in a peaceful direction, and in towards free markets than anyone who could possibly do through like endorsing a Republican and hoping for the best.
Right. Okay. So, having said all that, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire because I said I would, Hector.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yes.
Actually, you're under
When
fire.
you-
I'm just gonna sit here and chill as the
when-
lackey.
When I first had you on, you were my first guest for Friendly Fire.
Yep.
And you did very well. I enjoyed it. I had some tough questions for you, and I think what I like about you and other libertarian candidates, this is like probably my favorite thing about libertarian candidates. And it's very consistent. You find a libertarian candidate, you're probably going to find this behavior. They answer questions head on. I don't think I've ever heard so far. I mean, I'm sure there's been some, but I haven't heard a libertarian who kind of gets all mealy mouthed and like, well, okay, like they'll just be like, okay, yes, or some variation thereof, right? Like they may not say exactly yes or no, but I feel like libertarians tend not to be afraid to answer tough questions. And so I like that because
That's quite the lead in he has here, Hector. Get ready. This is a big lead.
So
it's a batter up.
Yeah. So in the last episode, where you and I were on the show, I asked you about your plan to raise $150,000 so that you could get matching funds from the government.
Right.
And I don't remember what the number was at the time that you had already raised, and I didn't bother looking it up. But we did say we were going to come back to it and just kind of, like hold your feet to the fire. So
Sure.
How did that turn out?
It went. It didn't. Apparently, I missed a filing deadline for the matching funds, and that's one of those things that you don't expect to get a letter in the mail that says, "Oh, you missed it. So sorry." And if you disagree, sue me.
And did you raise the 150?
No, because there's really at that point no point in trying to continue to try and aim for a plan that is broken on its face.
Gotcha. And then last question on that note. What's the plan next time? Like if you were to run again, what would you do differently?
Well, honestly, there's a huge difference, right? With more time, you'd recruit a bigger team. You would have a stronger media presence, and I would honestly recruit a grassroots network at a lower level that would support actual electioneering on in the retail sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you do the sine waves, you do the balking, you do the talking. That is on like a phone or just and the difference now between then and now is that honestly I jumped into the race very late.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to organize all that, and on top of that, I was already running, and I'm sure Tub can speak to some of this, but you're basically we are working. I mean, Tub has actually said something right now. We're working in headwinds, right, against people who think that Ron DeSantis is some kind of libertarian. And so first you have to, you have to confront the reality that have to re-educate people on what a libertarian is before you can even start talking to them about what are the proper solutions forward. So it ends up being that the campaign has proffered a lot of issues related to what's going on now, with that aren't typically the focus of what most libertarian campaigns at a state level will talk about. And what do I mean by that is simply I think the message of the campaign has changed like 3 times and it's evolved because of current events. So in other words, you have the situation where when we started off, it was red flag Ron, and this is probably the Florida is probably one of the most hostile states in the country to the Second Amendment and to self defense than any state in the country that's run by Republicans. That says a lot. We're actually Florida being the only Republican state now that actually has red flag laws in the books, that is run by Republicans. That is, and then what happened after that? Well, cost of living crisis, inflation crisis happened, right? So you pivot to you look at that, and this is the issue that's going to affect most Floridians for generations. And then after that, what do you have? You have immigration flights and distraction actions by DeSantis, and then Hurricane Ian, which and the aftermath of what was happening. You have contractors being arrested. You have the reality that recommendations by the Institute of Justice in 2004 to reform Florida's occupational licensing laws have been ignored since 2004. So that means that all hurricanes that have hit the state have actually there has been a regulatory block in Florida to prevent out-of-state contractors from helping rebuild. And so that what happens is that like 5 years later, places like the Panhandle that got hit by Hurricane Michael are still 3 years behind on reconstruction. And then you look at an even more populated place in Southwest Florida, and you're going to wonder, geez, how long is this going to take to actually rebuild these homes? Because the government doesn't have any trouble with its own regulations. They can rebuild the Sanibel Causeway in days, but for a simple house, it'll take years. Right. And that's something that and that's something completely at the behest of, we're all at the mercy of state regulations when it comes to that. So when I say that, we are responsible to speaking to the issues at hand, and we haven't had the flexibility to try and broadcast stick to one particular set of issues, because really we're finding that the state of Florida is in greater and greater peril under the current management, for lack of better terms. I hope that answers the question, because I do want to point out that this is important.
No, I agree. And to follow up on that, you might remember, and I think you do, we here in, not we, but Florida arrested somebody who came from Texas. He had a valid roofing license. He came over here. His license was not reciprocated in any way. And he was trying to, offer his services to homeowners. He engaged, worked out a contract with somebody. I don't know the details of that contract. And
it was just a quote. No work was done. Just
okay.
A quote.
And so DPPR, they came out, and I think they investigated, and then they had the man arrested. Not even like, hey, okay, look, dude, it seems like you got a valid license in Texas, and so you're not just like, the nature of the law is said to, we're going to protect homeowners from getting cheated by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Okay, let's just take that at face value. Fine. All right. Well, then why didn't they bother saying, okay, well, you have a legitimate license by another state, which means it's probably the requirements are probably similar to ours. So the only issue here is really a matter of administration. It's just a matter of paperwork, right? Chances are whatever went into him receiving his license in Texas is relatively equal to what would go into receiving a license here in Florida. So if the argument is we're going to protect citizens from, bad actors, he's not a bad actor. So there was no reason to arrest him. So you're right. This is where we need to speak truth to power and say, this is unacceptable. Like, this actually harmed residents, at least one.
See, here's I think that we as libertarians have to have two conversations usually. First, we have to explain to them who we are, what we have going on, what libertarians believe, and then we can have another conversation about here's what I want to do. Like, we always have to have that. But I also think that some of what Hector is saying there is something that maybe that's why we are entirely different than the duopoly. Because if you notice, the two big parties, they will camp out on two issues, one on each side is basically what they do. And they will do everything they can to keep the narrative there, because they don't want to have to pivot and answer and deal with these other issues. And maybe that's where libertarians are a little bit different. We're a little more open to the idea, okay, yeah, this is what we started with, but now I've learned this or this has happened, and we're willing and able to make that change and go, wait a minute, let's address this. Let's talk about this for a minute. And maybe that's where the other two parties struggle. They want to just camp out right here and say they have to keep everything that goes back to those two topics again.
Right. Let me add one thing. When I said immigration earlier, and how did that play into Hurricane Ian and rebuilding? Well, it's very clear that about 1/3 of all construction laborers are actually undocumented, unauthorized to work, immigrants. So when we start, when we allow our state government to start fear mongering on immigrants, and all of a sudden cracking down on their movement here into Florida. What are we actually doing is creating an impossible situation for construction companies to find accessible labor, and that means delays for rebuilding. That means all kinds of jobs. I mean, so in other words, not just the occupational licensing is what we're talking about. Even the laborers for the occupation for those companies that exist on occupational licensing. So when I say we have an impossible situation in Florida in regards to rebuilding, and construction generally. So when it talks to cost of living issues and why property is so expensive and why can't anybody find enough laborers to actually build houses in Florida, this is an all-encompassing topic. The labor itself is the biggest sunk cost you'll ever have in any business. Anyone who's ever owned a business or hired people will know that. But the state government doesn't care. I mean, remember, this is the same state government that declared people essential or non-essential.
Right. And I think people need to be reminded of that. And they need to be reminded of the things that did happen. I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other night, and he had pointed out his observation was that as far as libertarians go, it seems like in terms of getting libertarians kind of, like revising how we give our message and kind of getting a little bit more on the same page, if you will, it seems like libertarians in blue states tend to be ones that support this notion of, okay, you can't run anybody against Ron DeSantis because he did really, really well. And I'm like, compared to California or New York, sure, that's a fair argument to have. However, I live in Florida. I don't live in California. I don't live in New York. And so what I remember was being told, like you said, you're non-essential or essential. And I was like, well, everybody's essential because the money that they make goes to pay the essential bills. Like, you can say, you can just kind of wave your hand and say that somebody's job is essential or non-essential, but that job goes to pay for bills that are essential: water, food, electricity, right? Like those are things that are essential to people, and they have to pay for them, and they pay for them through what is deemed as a non-essential. So I think, these are kind of the things that sprout from having candidates like you guys that will step up and say, and it's a very simple question, 7 words, I think it is. Somebody count them. I'm not counting them. But is that the best we can do? And I feel like, what, we can do better. And that's where the Libertarian Party comes in. We say, I saw you counting over there.
Yeah, we're good. You're good.
I like using the forward version of that. Can we do better?
That works too. Make it even more simple, right? Can we do better? And I think that's where the Libertarian Party shines. That's our value to everyone else in the political sphere, which is, can we do better? Or if you want to be very verbose, you could say, is that the best we can do? Right. And so I like the fact that you guys are running. I like the fact that Tub is out there saying, all right, let's get some affiliates stood up. You're having a debate with the, I think it's another is it a third party candidate or an independent?
She's running as no party.
A no party. Okay, so she's running as no party, but these are the kind of things that we need to be doing and supporting from our candidates and saying, like, this is one of the ways that we get that message out there, little bit by little bit.
Sure.
So, all right.
I mean,
go ahead.
it's important. By the way, it is important. Let me not. It needs to be very abundantly clear. Libertarians popularize ideas that the mainstream is not talking about.
Right.
So when I talk about immigration and issues and why the state actually does have an immigration policy, and we have to be clear and concise about what's important about it. This is the reason why we have about 6 million self-identified Hispanic immigrants, first and second, immigrants and first generation living in Florida, from Puerto Rico to every country in South America. They're here, and it's an immense disservice to that population and that vote, by the way, to not talk about these issues in the human approach that that libertarians stand for. Right. So that's all I wanted to say on that.
Gotcha. All right. So let's segue into the next part. This is going to be the fun conversation, because yesterday we found out that an Arizona candidate running for Senate, Arizona candidate for the Libertarian Party, Mark Victor, he stepped down and endorsed Blake Masters, the Republican in the race. Now I had a fit, just to give people a little bit of background. A lot of this, a lot of the reason that we're even talking about Mark Victor at all, anybody, is that he had a debate. He was on the debate stage with his opponents, and in that debate stage, he said the scariest 3 words apparently to the libertarian community. He said age of consent. All right, and he said it in a context of talking about things that we can vote on, things that we can't vote on. And so it came across to libertarians as, oh my God, he's trying to lower the age of consent. He's one of them wacko libertarians, that believes that, we should get rid of the age of consent altogether. Well, as it turns out, that's not what he was saying. And I criticized him very heavily for that. And I even said that he should step down, because I too kind of thought that's where he was going. Then I heard his response, and I liked his response, because I was like, oh my God, this is a response I could take to any person. So, and I did. I took it to one of my friends who is a bit more on the liberal side, and I said, hey man, here's what he said. And then, here's why people were upset. And then here's what he said after the fact. What do you think? And my friend's like, oh, it sounds very reasonable. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I have no issues with that. Now, he's not a libertarian, but he was cool with the conversation, right? And this is a regular guy. This is not, me as a blowhard saying, theorizing. I literally asked somebody, right? And so then, I had him on the show, talked to him, whatever. And so I kind of got behind him. I was like, all right, yeah, this dude's solid. I watched some of his videos, and I think he communicates the message of liberty very well in a very simple manner, like easy to understand and digest. Then yesterday he drops out, puts out a message and a video, and said, all right, look, I had this 20-minute conversation with Blake Masters. And, at the end, he's like, he said this weird line. He's like, I wasn't planning on, throwing my support behind you, but man, you convinced me in a whole 20 minutes. And so here was my big issue. One, that reminded me of a time when I went to a college and I said, I'm just here to take a look, and I want to see what's going on. And the woman's like, okay. And as we're going through, she kind of dropped some hints. She was like, DL, I just don't know if you're going to be right for this school. And I was like, or I think she said Daniel at the time, because I didn't go by DL then. And then, so then I started kind of proving myself, like beefing myself up. And then at the end, she said, I just, I wasn't sure that you were going to be right for this school. But after seeing you, I think that I want to extend an invitation for you to come to our school. And I just ate it up. I was like, oh yeah, totally. Right. So it just felt like this sales gimmick, like I wasn't expecting to get behind you, but man, you convinced me. And if it had been like a Joe Rogan length conversation, then I'd be like, well, okay, maybe after, or if there had been some pushback and be like, nah, I disagree with that. Convince me, do a better job of convince me. But none of that. It was just a few questions, a handful of questions. And then he threw his support behind him, like on the drop of a hat. So I was upset. Now, thoughts. I've been talking a lot. Thoughts, guys.
So I think that he went into that already making that decision, to be honest with you.
That's kind of how I feel. I can't prove it, but I feel that way.
But the question becomes why.
Mhm.
Like, and here's the thing that ordinarily, this easily falls into conspiracy theory areas that we argue about that we don't know about, and it doesn't really get us anywhere. So if you just deal with what we see and what we know, all right, it makes it hard as other libertarians because they will see other people outside the party will see examples like this, and we do have to answer for things sometimes. There are many times as we're out on the campaign trail, we have to answer for the actions of other libertarians, and then you got to kind of separate yourself. Hey, this isn't us. So here's what's going to happen. This wasn't just another typical libertarian out there spewing off some stuff. They go, well, what about that craziness? This was a guy who had established himself. He was actually doing well. He got into the debates even. And from what you're hearing is he was polling, and whether we take his number as true, he's polling at roughly 15%. Like, that's a legit stand. And as libertarians, we would be like, hey, we're making an impact here.
Right.
And to dip out like that and just be like, yeah, okay, never mind. Let's just go with the Republicans. We as libertarians and as candidates, I promise you, this will come up. And this will be how I know you're not going to be like this guy. Like, how do I know that you're not just going to get running and I throw money at you and I support you and the party backs you and all of these things happen? And how do we know that you're not just going to quit? And then we'll make the explanation of this is why we're in it. This is what we do. But there will still always be, for at least a while, that doubt, that level of doubt as you're speaking to people where they'll go, yeah, but will he? And I think that, unfortunately, I think that he selfishly, and I say not based on why he did it, the fact that he did shows that he was selfishly looking at himself and not caring about the party. And to me,
he said those words.
You have to care about the party a little bit. You have to worry about how this is going to be.
Now, let me ask you, Tub, because this is a big thing that comes up in libertarian circles, is a lot of people will ask, they'll say something like, okay, so you're party over principle. And I don't see it that way. What's your response to, hey, if you're saying that he shouldn't have backed the guy, because the argument becomes, okay, if Blake Masters' opponent wins and he's a very terrible guy, at least Blake Masters might put his finger in the dam and keep it from, from pouring out all over the city, even if he's not this great character. So we got to do what we got to do, and we got to hold to our principles, not the party. Well, how do you respond to that?
Okay, so here's the thing. We talked about, even you and I talked about this a little bit last night. And I said, listen, there's a difference in what's happening here. Now, had he been in, like, we have a unitary election for city council, okay? And so then after, it's the top two, regardless of what party they're in, okay? So, and so let's say after this unitary election, let's say I lose. Okay, and then I come out and say, hey, listen, there was this guy, even though I was running against him, he seems pretty solid. This is where we're at. I think that's different than what Mr. Victor did. What he did is, even before there was any election or anything, he dipped out. Now, here's the thing. I still run as Tub. Now, when I say that, I mean that there are things that the party believes that I don't necessarily take on. Okay. Right. But this is also part of my complaint about the party, if you will, in that we don't have a good, solid 4 or 5 things that we say, this is what we stand on. We come together on these regardless of what we are. Basically, if you're going to run with us and you're going to be in our circle, we have to have these things in common. And we have to figure out what those things are going to be, because right now we're running in 1,000 different directions, and it's hard to get libertarians to come together, which then says, well, what is it? Not party over principle. Okay, well, listen, here's an idea. Why can't we have a combination of those two things? Why can't we say, hey, I'm in this party and here are these things that we stand on, and we can disagree about other things, but we have to stand here. We have to agree here. And I think that until we get there, we're going to always have this internal struggle about who's the libertarian, who's not, the principled argument, which DL you make quite often. Like libertarians that come to this point where they go, well, I'm principled. And because I'm principled, I don't have to do anything. That's not true either. Right.
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of this. I have long criticized this notion of somebody saying, well, I'm just principled. And I'm like, no, it sounds like you're just making an excuse for yourself.
Right.
Really. Because part of my principles also mean, do it like we talked about earlier in the show. We said, look, we understood that you weren't going to come in and sweep the race and kick out Ron DeSantis.
Paul, you
right?
understood that. You did. You said you made
Okay,
that
my
clip
bad,
out
my
of,
bad.
right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Let me not put words in you guys' mouth. So I understood that, right? And I supported you guys anyway, because I understood that there's still a value. And part of my principles is, like we were talking about earlier and saying, like, there are things that a candidacy can do along the way, and that they build up for it, and they set, okay, that's some weird comments that have just come in. Looks like I got a bot in the chat. Sorry about that, folks. But there are some things that happen. So like Tub is going around and he's now helping out one of the other affiliates get stood up. Like, this is a good thing, right? It is a good thing that, that you're getting the message out there through, I know that Hector had the debate watch that you did, and then you have a debate now with another candidate, like, these are part of the principles, which is getting that message out there and getting people used to seeing this idea, like normalizing the idea that the Libertarian Party runs candidates. Because sure, maybe like, okay, maybe for some libertarians that are still going to vote Ron DeSantis because they really like him. Okay, that's fine. But what happens, the next go around when they don't like the Republican guy, right? What happens then? Well, have we prepared ourselves to actually run a candidate? And part of that preparation means continually running candidates so that we can build on the past successes, however small they may be, or however large they may be. So to me, that's part of being principled. It's not really a matter of just, the party, but in a sense, kind of, because how are we going to say as libertarians that, the Republicans and the Democrats are exactly the same, and then turn around and say, well, I'm principled, so I got to support this guy that I just basically agreed was the same as the other guy, but he's totally different, right? Like, to me, it's a very inconsistent message. And we need to, in part of being principled is being consistent. And if we're going to say that the duopoly has a stronghold on politics in a negative way, then we can't turn around and go, but this is the one exception, or we need to make a hell of a case for that. Did I just summarize everything? Like, dang.
All right, y'all have a blessed day. Just shut it down.
Mic drop, I guess, right? Like,
thank you, Pastor Dio.
Right.
So let me ask you a question then.
Yeah.
So how do we think, and I ask this not knowing anything and not looking for an aha or anything, what do we think this does to the party? Because it seems as though, I know we're not going to get into, like you mentioned, we're not going to get to this person said this or that person said that.
Right.
But there is being a ripple effect, if you will, of what he did, and that it is stirring debate within the party. And sometimes the last thing that the libertarians need is more debate inside the party. Okay. Right. So what do we do? Like, we're in a rough area right now, because if it's mishandled by libertarian leadership, if you will, it could only get worse. Right. And so I think this is a good time for our libertarian leadership to really kind of stand up and be leaders. And now here's what they have to do. I think this is, since we have new leadership now, this is their first real issue that they're going to have to deal with. And I think a lot will be shown based on how well will you bring all of this back together again. Because so far, all of our issues have been the usual libertarian things. Let's just be honest, But I think this one here is a little bit different, because there are people now who are voicing inside of this that ordinarily don't get involved in this stuff. Like DL, I tend not to get involved in party drama. Like, usually I get that information from you. You kind of keep me updated. Hey, here's what's going on.
That's the best thing for you, man.
But thanks, I appreciate that. But usually I don't care, but this is happening. And this is just a day in, and there's already voices who ordinarily don't kind of step into that arena are stepping into that arena, and they're saying not very good things about him. And I'm not disagreeing with them. Right. But at some point, leadership has to come together and say, oh, hang on, we have to hold this together. Are they going to be able to?
I don't know. So far, I see some issues. I see some problems. I'm not going to name any names, but I have looked and seen some comments that kind of suggest that that at least some leadership is not taking this in the serious way that they should. And what I mean by that, I'm not going to parse my words. I think they may be on board with it and just not saying so. And it's kind of like when you don't have to necessarily. Like, if you buy a new car, I don't have to be like, man, that car is awesome. That's great. But if I don't do that, then that clearly tells you that I'm not excited about it, right? Like if I don't express excitement, then I'm not excited. But that doesn't mean that I hate it either. I might just, maybe I'm not that excited, and that's okay. Maybe I just go, that's a nice car.
So you're almost impartial, but I don't think this is a good time for impartiality. I think this is a time when you have to really kind of make some ugly stands.
Right. And I think Arizona Mises Caucus, I'm going to give them a lot of kudos, because they came out and they said, and this is actually an old comment. It's on Twitter, so it's okay. It's public, so whatever. But I think they summarized it, and they said exactly what I would expect leadership to say, or in something in this vein. And they tweeted out, in spite of numerous calls to do so, we, the Arizona Mises Caucus, do not endorse Blake Masters. We are not now, nor have we ever been, Republican nationalists. It should be painfully obvious from our platform that support of Blake Masters was never an option. And so in my mind, I've seen some leadership come out and they're like, look, we can't support Republicans. And I've said that myself as the chair of the party. However, I've said that in more generic conversations, not when there's been this issue of a libertarian candidate. So to me, I think there's a huge difference in saying we cannot, or a more preferred, never an option, right? To me, in this particular case, when you've got something like this going on, the leadership needs to come out and they say, look, this was never an option for us. Now, members, you can support whomever you want, right? Like that still stands. Yep. Libertarian candidates, you have to earn every single vote, so you are not entitled to any votes, right? And I think candidates, the same thing. Candidates can, like, in reality, Mark Victor can support whomever he wants, right? He can drop out and he can say, you know what, I should have never been in this race, or whatever. He could give any reason that he wants, and he could say, I'm not, like, he's at full, there is, I will not, I'm trying to think of how to say it exactly. I do not take issue with the idea that he can do that. I think it's a bad idea, but I think he can do that. Now, with our leadership, it's a different story. Leadership, I think, needs to be unequivocal, and they need to come out and they need to say, we as a party support libertarian candidates, period. No equivocations.
As stupid as this sounds, but the example that I could use that kind of fits into this is at our church. Okay. And so Halloween just went by, and as a church, we do not take on any of those activities. We just don't. We're like, hey, you know what? We don't do any of the fall festival, the trucker. We don't do any of those things. But here's what we tell people. We as a church make this stand, but whatever you choose to go and do at your house and with your kids, that's up to you. Like you go ahead, but we are going to stand here. And I think that this is the same thing that you're saying, that as a party, we need to stand here. Right. And we got to make a hard stand, say, no, we don't do this. We will not be a part of this. But you go make your decisions. You go do what you want to go do. But as a whole, we're camping out right here. Right.
Now, let me ask you guys, and either one of you guys can answer this. Either one of you guys can answer this, because what I want to try to do is answer some of the things that people have said that kind of support this. Because, it's more than just a debate of who said what. It's a debate of strategy as well. And the reality is that the Libertarian Party is small. We simply do not have the resources to run candidates at every level. So one of the criticisms or one of the arguments in favor of this have been like, hey, this candidate, because like Blake Masters, everybody came out and they were like, oh, look, he's read Rothbard, he's read Mises. And I'm like, I don't really care about his library, but whatever. So the argument has been like, when you look at a lot of his positions, he aligns with libertarians, and some of these issues are important ones, right? Because not every political issue is the same. So there are some, the issue of war is much bigger than the issue of, should we tax you for the local park? Right. Like these one has way more weight, I think altogether. So is there reason, since we are a small party and we're not, like he wasn't going to win, like he was polling, I think the 15% was one small poll, but I think the more consistent number was somewhere in the 3 to 5 range, kind of a normal range. So he wasn't going to win. So then the argument becomes, well, it's a good thing because he's backing out and it's a strategic move. So how do you respond to this idea that it's a strategic move on our part?
All right, hang on. So I'll let Hector answer this, but here's what I'll say real quick. Then shut up and don't run it all then. Like, if your thing is going to be like, if I'm not going to win it all, then what should I do? I'll just drop it out again. No, don't run it all. sit out the whole time. Don't get involved. Don't waste the time. Don't waste the party's energy. Don't waste the party's money. If you're saying, I'm just at this number, so I'm just going to dip out anyway. Stay out completely.
What you got, Hector?
All right, so there's quite a bit to untangle there. The at the end of the day, I want to point out that one is that Mark Victor was under a lot of pressure. He had been smeared, he'd been slandered, he'd been under a pressure for months to drop out. This is self-admission from people like Dave Smith themselves, out of their mouths. They're the people behind the people behind this basically made it a fait accompli. By the time that Black Masters got to this live recorded Zoom call with Mark Victor, the thing was done, right? So it would be disingenuous to think that Mark Victor didn't have that in mind, no matter what Black Masters would say that he was going to endorse him that night. So that let me just clear the air on that one, right? But that points out to something very a hard truth, which is that there are libertarians outside the Libertarian Party that and they are libertarians. I mean, that feel the Libertarian Party is not a vehicle for freedom at all, right? That's a hard truth, and they will take on any tactic necessary to win elections. And this is just simply what you have witnessed for the last couple of weeks has been a very clear show of that. Unfortunately, that means that we're, instead of dealing with, this libertarian movement that can, well, here, let me put it to you this way. The deal that happens, any political deals, and in my entire, I've been involved in politics for 16 years or so. I've seen political deals. I've seen a lot of a lot of spurious tactics. And there's two things that come to mind. One is that people who make those kind of deals, the people who benefit the most from them are not the candidate, or the one making the deal, because they're kind of pushed into it. It's really the power broker involved, right? They're the ones who say, "Oh, see, I did that. I'm the one that benefits from the relation." Of course, the other side who actually wins their election based on these tactics. The second thing is that you don't ask for permission; you just do it, right? Blake Masters going out there and saying, "Oh, Ron Paul endorsed me. You look at me," when Ron Paul never actually released a statement that's to that effect. And it's better to ask for forgiveness and permission from his campaign's point of view. You're not dealing with people who are basically fair actors, and at the end of the day, we have to be able to relate that the Libertarian Party is a threat to their movement within the Republican Party. They don't like what's happening in the Libertarian Party. They don't like the Mises Caucus move in the Libertarian Party. They will pull out every trick in the book to try and dismantle what's happening. And for the most part, I've always, there's only one thing. When Dave Smith came out and endorsed Blake Masters, my first thought was, I hope this is some kind of plan to basically show that he can flex, right? That he can be a power broker, that he can flex and that he can basically align himself to groups outside of the LP that have all the experience in the world and the resources to run a national campaign should he decide to run for office, for presidency, which basically I don't perceive him doing so at this point. And that is that's where we stand. So we're looking at a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes, a lot of different reasonings, a lot of different conflicting agendas, and at the end of the day, what does it mean to all of us? It means that we can really just watch. It doesn't mean that we just watch and maybe just watch things like see the movement just kind of eat itself. No, the reality is that we have to still do what we're doing, right? We run our campaigns, we build up our affiliates, we build up support. But you know what? There's no reason to not tell the truth. There's no reason to not say that what you guys are doing is not right from a Libertarian Party perspective. After that, it's just individuals, being individuals, free to make their own decisions. And so when but we can't let people think that this is normal behavior, like this is expected normal behavior, and that that is something that everyone should try to approve, right, or disapprove. They know what they're doing, but the general public doesn't know because they haven't lived this. So what? How would they know? But what is, again, it just means that, this conversation that we're having and everyone's listening is something it just means that your participation matters that much more. And you can't, and leaving it up to somebody else is never going to be the answer, whether it's the Mark Victors of the world, the Dave Smiths of the world, or some people in leadership that in Libertarian Party. At the end of the day, it's really, where are you bringing in the libertarian revolution? Because that ultimately, the Libertarian Party represents a revolutionary movement, and that's the other thing. The political establishment figures who are working within the duopoly are not in this for a revolution. They're here for reform. They're here for power. They have their own reasoning behind what they're trying to accomplish. Now I just went on and on, but I hope that's clear. Sure.
So let me ask a little bit further though. We have candidates that are running that are in the movement for liberty. We know that there are at least a handful of Republicans that are invested in the idea of liberty. Like Thomas Massey comes to mind, right? Like he really strikes me as somebody that actually does want liberty, even if he doesn't always vote in the way that I think he should, but he does a lot, right? So is it not the case that there could be some newcomers that are like, look, I'm frustrated with this two-party system, but I don't believe that the Libertarian Party is the best vehicle for me. I believe that the best vehicle is one of the two parties. And then, because the argument is, hey, there's newcomers in here. They're not the same as the old, and they want to do things differently. We should try to support them when we can. So is that not an argument? And I don't mean I'm stepping away from the idea of the party itself. No, the party should never. But there's a lot of individuals, right? There's candidates. There's members. Should they get entangled in that, or should they say, you know what, we're holding fast and we're going to be more about the party?
Well, right there, I think you said it when you said when we can, when we can. And so what I'm saying though is that once again, the person who's going to hold the more libertarian beliefs is going to be the libertarian, not the Republican that has some good ideas. And remember, I've made this complaint about how we make this big deal about Republicans who have some liberty-leaning ideas. And as libertarians, we go, look at them, look how great they are. I go, that's unimpressive, because we have people in our own party who've been saying this for years. And now all of a sudden we care about this one guy who makes some things. And like I point out for for Thomas Massey, for example, here's the thing. He does have some liberty-leaning ideas, but he shouldn't get more attention than the libertarians who actually are this thinking. Here's the difference, though. He has established himself. Right. Okay? He has shown, I have a history. This is where I'm at. With Masters, we got nothing. We have nothing. So we don't have this thing to kind of grab onto and go, well, you know what? I understand that he's been doing this. I'm okay there. Okay. And I think that if our goal is simply to say, let's take the easiest vehicle into accomplishing this, shut down the Libertarian Party now and go run in those two and hope that something changes. The reason why I say this, I had a guy actually reach out to me. I think it was yesterday. He's like, listen, the easiest thing for you to do would be to just run in as a Republican. I said, but here's the problem. I would either have to lie about who I am and what I believe, or they're going to see through this, and ultimately I won't get through there anyway, because they're going to look at it and go, wait a minute, this dude's a little too far for us. Because let's be honest, when it comes to Mr. Massey, you have to understand, he's still a Republican. If you've noticed, the Republicans haven't turned against him. They have said, dude, get out of here. You know why? Because ultimately he's still one of them. So just because he has some ideas that sound libertarian, he's still doing plenty Republican to keep him happy with his party. So for those of us who say, here's the thing, I'm libertarian. Could the easiest thing for me here in my local race to dip out and go run as a Republican would have been the easiest thing in the world? Because the Republican Party would probably take me in and listen, I have the things that they're looking for, but that's not who I am. Right. That would, in a sense, that would force me to lie about who I am and what I believe in an effort to maybe get them to take me on, that I become something inside of there. Because here's what's ultimately going to happen. Let's say I do that and I give in and I get elected as a Republican. Guess what? After some amount of time, they're going to expect me to vote Republican. They're going to expect me to follow that line. So what's going to happen then when I don't? What's going to happen when they start going, you know what? We got to primary this guy because he's not voting the way that we want him to vote. Right. So I say, if we're just looking for the easier way in, and that becomes the party's thinking, shut down the party. Forget it then. Just go attack however you want. Go attack as a bunch of individuals trying to take over the duopoly. It's not going to work. Why do you think we have the Libertarian Party? So I think that we have to come to this point where we go, this is who we are. This is what we believe. This is where I'll stand. And I will run from this position, even if it makes it harder. And that's why these ones who go, well, it's going to be hard. Shut up then. You knew when you got in as a libertarian, it's going to be harder. And if you're not ready for that fight, don't get in. Right.
No, I totally agree. I kind of liken this to when I was growing up, you guys remember, we watched Rocky, the Rocky movies, right? All, 1, 2, 900, however many there were.
Right.
And, but the origin of the story is that, he's just a boxer trying to get his opportunity, and then the opportunity comes, and then he seizes that moment, and he just really literally knocks it out of the park, right? And he just surprises everyone. And I feel like the Libertarian Party needs, we're basically that little fledgling boxer that's just trying to get our shot at the title. And if we could just get that shot, and I think the problem that we've run into is that, unlike Rocky, we haven't always been prepared when we get that shot. Mm-hmm. Right now, I think there's some, I think there have been some people that have. I can only go back in the last, couple of years that I've been a part of the party. But just even recently, we saw Shane Hazel up in Georgia, in the, he got an opportunity to go to a debate, and I think he did amazing. I think Chase Oliver did very well. So did Ryan Graham, and I actually think that Mark Victor did, for what he was able to get on the debate. I mean, the debates are kind of, once a libertarian gets in a debate, that doesn't guarantee a lot, because they still got to have an opportunity to speak. Right. And I've watched these debates. I see that, sometimes the questions, are more directed at the big two candidates. The big two candidates will sometimes pretend like the libertarian's not even there. They'll just be like, I saw it in Chase Oliver's debate. Senator Warnock kept talking about the guy that wasn't even there, right? Rather than just address the opponent that was there, he's talking about, he keeps acting as if Chase was not even present. And I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. So it doesn't guarantee anything, but I think we need to really be prepared and say, look, I'm going to fight like hell, like Rocky did. And when I get that opportunity, I'm going to knock this out of the park. I'm going to knock this person the hell out. Right. Hector, you had something you wanted to say.
I just want to reiterate something that Tubb said about lying. You can't lie your way to freedom. You can't. The reason is in politics. The reason is that although you can lie your way to get into elected office, you cannot change the culture. You cannot build a movement. You cannot gain enough support for even a simple legislation if you're lying to the people. If you don't have the grassroots support, if you don't have the people supporting you, because you're lying to them. You can't, in other words, you can't trick people into electing a libertarian. You cannot do that. And ultimately, especially, we espouse, and I've confronted people on this, we espouse that, we're here to change the culture. We're here to win the hearts and minds. Oh, okay, but we're going to lie about Blake Masters being a libertarian. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense. Oh, we're going to lie about this one to say, oh, we're going to allow them to use Ron Paul's name to shore up their bona fides, right? I mean, the reality is that, come on, at some point you just have to cut this out and tell the truth. I mean, what positions do you have? And Blake Masters comes in and says, I'm not a libertarian. I was when I was a lot younger, and what does that mean for today? Doesn't mean anything, honestly.
Right. So let me devil's advocate.
Sure.
Let me devil's advocate real quick. So let's say we don't lie about it, right? Let's say that, and I say we, I just mean maybe large voices that have influence, and they just say, look, no, he's not a libertarian. He is definitely a Republican. And here are all these areas that I disagree with him on. And also, but here's some areas that I think are very, very important, and I agree with him on. And I think that at this particular moment, it is very important to support this particular person over a libertarian candidate. Right. What if they're, putting their cards on the table and they're saying all that? Then how do you respond to people when they say, well, maybe that's this, because it's a strategy, right? So what do you say to that?
Yes, deception is always a strategy. Absolutely.
But is that really deception when someone's coming straight forward and saying, look, they're not a libertarian. They don't agree with all the libertarian ideas.
Okay.
But these handful of ones are important. We need to support it.
Then you don't get to complain about the Libertarian Party not getting where they need to be. See, here's what's happening. Maybe people are doing that thinking right there. They're like, the party's not doing anything. Well, you know what? honestly, the way to say this, if you would shut up and do what you believe and make that stand, even when it's not the most popular one, we can get to where we need to be. But because we've fallen for this thinking that says, well, this is the best one, and this is what's really going to, because we run into this right now a lot as we campaign. We get the wasting our vote on the Libertarian. And I say it's only a wasted vote if you give it to the person who doesn't deserve it. I don't care about what party it is.
Right.
Okay. And so, no, so I say, if you say, well, I'm a libertarian and that's a libertarian, but I think this other guy is going to be better for this other reason, then fine. You don't get too fussed about the Libertarian Party. You don't get to come on and complain and go, well, you know why the Libertarian Party is not getting anywhere? Yes, not getting anywhere because of people like you who are deciding that I'm going to vote for the non-libertarian because it's easier. All right, fine. Then don't complain about when we're not getting. But here's the thing. Don't get in our way either. Like, don't say you're one of us and then get in the way of us. And I think that's what we're running into. We're running into everybody wants everything easy. They just want it easy. Whether it's a candidate, whether it's a voter, whatever it is, I just want it easy. I just want my vote to go to the winner. So you don't really care about voting for the best person. You want to vote for the winner. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we have to understand as libertarians, guess what? We're not going to be the winner. But when we get enough people who start realizing, you know what, maybe this time we don't win. But if we can keep moving forward, which has exactly been my problem that we said we've been a party for 50 years, we should be past this by now. Like by now at 50 years, we should be at the point where we don't have to be like this. We have enough of us to go, okay, this is who we are. This is what we do. The problem is we keep getting tricked, if just for lack of a better term, by the duopoly that says, you know, you got to do this if you want to be effective. Okay, well, you know what? We keep falling for it, and then we complain about the libertarians. Why aren't the Libertarian Party doing anything? Well, because you know what? You're not moving the concept forward. You're willing to take the easy way out.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And I was only being devil's advocate.
I know.
To give
By
you guys...
the way, I do want to jump in here and say that this is a problem in this race with DeSantis. It's not just the media had basically laid out that Ron DeSantis is a libertarian. Ron DeSantis' people like to lay out that he's a libertarian. And I would like to point out that there was actually a lawsuit that was filed this past week in Palm Beach County of a parent of a child who's using the new the so-called Don't Say Gay bill or Parental Rights in Education Act to enforce he's a deeply faith person who doesn't want his public school teacher teaching his kids about gay people or homosexuality or alternative lifestyles, whatever you want to call it. And so he sued the Palm Beach County School Board under this law. And in the lawsuit, he says that he is a libertarian who supports a live and let live philosophy, but he wants his rights respected too. So we have to have the conversation about this meaning of libertarian, even in the modern sense, because there's always this threat of people changing the dictionary, right? In 1984, we saw that whether it was 1984 and Newspeak, or the media simply just redefining what terms mean in order to fit their narrative that they're pushing on that day. So we are dealing with this. This is an actual real problem in Florida, and I want people to recognize that this is something that we are facing on a regular basis, whether it's through the campaign or whether it's just the party or just casually how people even use the term libertarian. That's all I gotta say.
Gotcha. So I guess we need to kind of wind this down. So I want to end on one final note. This is something that's kind of been bothering me. So I'm just going to throw it out there and see what you guys have to say. I'm thinking that you'll probably agree with me. Twitter is a rough place. Tub, you're not there. Good for you. I'm too invested. So I got to stay there now. I don't even like Facebook anyway. So, but one of the things that I've seen over the last, couple of years is this notion that libertarians need to be safe with the way that they talk, can't be too radical, can't post memes that are too crazy. And initially I kind of was on board with that. And I still am to a degree, right? I think there's a time and a place for things. But one of the things that I started warming up to, and this is watching the New Hampshire folks, and because they can tweet some very wild things, right? And at first I was like, man, you guys need to calm down. But then I came to this realization. I said, it seems like there are two major factions in the party, and each one of them is prepared to use the messaging that works for them. right? And it's like there's no there's no ability to work with cross messaging. Like, okay, some other side said something wild that I don't particularly agree with in the way that they said it, so therefore I act as if I am, I can't do anything. Like I'm at a standstill now because you ruined my opportunity to talk about liberty. And I started realizing that, maybe the problem is that we need to learn how to take somebody else's message, even if it's in a way that we don't particularly care for, and figure out how to drive that conversation back to a place where we can have where we can talk about liberty, right? So if New Hampshire tweets out something pretty wild and I disagree with it, I still should be able to take that and go, you know what? I disagree with that, but here's where they're coming from. And then just basically turn that conversation back to a place where I can work with it, right? So this is now this new place that I'm in. And one of the things, bringing this into the conversation that we're having here, candidates and even Libertarian Party members will say some things, right? And one of the criticisms was that Mark Victor's age of consent was just too far out there. It was, it was unacceptable. And I fired back and I said, well, number one, it seemed like only libertarians were really upset by that. The non-libertarians didn't seem to have a problem with it, right? Like his polling numbers were still good or even went up a little bit after his debate. So I disagree that's an issue. But all this time we've been defending people saying wild things, crazy things all over Twitter. But then all of a sudden, age of consent becomes the N-word for us. Like, really? And so I have a problem with that. And I think that is a garbage response. I think, if we were going to sit here and stand up and say, nope, we can say all kind of wild things, we can tweet out crazy memes, we don't care about this, then this is no different. Like, how is it that we're going to be able to defend all these other things? But and I get what I get what the age of consent concern is, but I also think that his response when he came back out was it was like 2-minute response. Like, you could put it out on Twitter and be like, man, this is what he said. And I think rational people will go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, he's not a lunatic that wants us to sleep with children, right? Like he's not that at all. And I don't think it was a hard sell whatsoever. So in my mind, that's a garbage answer, especially when it was an easy sell to say otherwise. Am I wrong in this?
No, I agree with you, but I don't know if you're saying that in the fact that why do we have to refute it to others? Like, you're almost saying, I don't know if you're saying, hey, we should just accept it and that's what they are and who cares? And the only thing I would say, if that's what you're thinking, is that I still have to address that sometimes.
Right.
Like I have to end up, if a libertarian goes and does something crazy, I got to spend a couple minutes of my time to steer them back again. But that is time that I have to take away from what would be my messaging to clear up a mess in order that I get back to my messaging again.
But isn't it the case that there can always be a mess?
Well, yeah, but the problem is that here's the thing. It depends on how much we as a party blow it up also.
Right.
See, if we learn how to stifle things and put them in context and put them in, like, it's not that big a deal. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's not allow it, which is just a leadership issue again. You've got to learn how to stifle things, keep things under control. Now, I'm not saying silence. I'm saying keep it where it belongs. You know what I'm saying? Because as these things grow, they reach out, and then it does get outside the party. And I'm going to tell you, the other two parties have these issues. They have internal issues as they fight this stuff. They're just far better at, for lack of a better term, controlling it. And so I think that the more that we're able to kind of contain it and keep it where it needs to be, we can do better then. Then guess what? I don't have to spend so much time cleaning that up over there because most people didn't hear about it. But if we would shut up inside of our side a little bit and be like, okay, why are we arguing about this? We're only making it worse. When do we become smart enough to go, you know what? I get what he's saying. We don't have to chime on this for the next 6 weeks.
Right.
We don't have to argue about this on Twitter and Facebook, mostly Twitter. You guys are just horrible over there. All right. So
it's a very bad place.
That you guys have to keep arguing about this, and that if we learn how to circle the wagons a little bit, stifle it, let's keep our message moving forward. And I think that makes it easier for everybody involved. Then can go, I don't have to keep answering for this stuff over here. I can keep moving on with what I have.
All right, Hector.
I think anybody who's using issues that are libertarian issues, there's no such thing as an issue that's sacrosanct, right? That you can't talk about. we're not the Republicans, we're not the Democrats. Particularly issues where there's so much difference in every jurisdiction. There's a different story, right? People actually talk about this repeatedly. The entire without getting too much in. I mean, okay, so in Florida, for instance, this is actually a very common situation where you have a relationship between teenagers, right? All of a sudden, one turns 18, and while the other person's 17, and that's statutory rape, right? So that's little. I mean, it's called it's the Romeo and Juliet loophole. In other words, that exists in the state of Florida. We have consent issues all over the place in Florida in regards to what age you can do something. In fact, under Florida law, you're not even a fully aged adult until you're 25. And Florida has the worst laws on these type of ageism issues in America. But the reality is that you can talk if someone's using these issues to criticize the Libertarian, they're just being dismissive. Anybody who uses that, including Dave Smith, is being disingenuous about their motivation.
Well, I don't know.
Let's
try not to drag.
I'm
trying not to stir up trouble.
There are people who will appease the man because he's popular, who do not want to run to the buzzsaw of a fanatic following that don't care about libertarianism anyway. Because if they did, they'd all be rushing to the Libertarian Party now upon his call. So the point is that we have to tell the truth. We cannot lie to people, and we can't remain silent, because the silence is just as bad as an omission. It's just as bad as if to pretend that everything's okay and to tell people things are okay when they're not. That's ludicrous.
No, I understand that, and I just want to make sure we're addressing more of an argument, less of a person, right? Because what ends up happening is you talk about a person, and then it ends up being a fight between people, rather than, hey, let's debate this idea. Let's debate this idea. Because you mentioned Dave Smith, but I've heard other people say it, or seen other people say it as well, right? And I understand the argument, right? The argument is, hey, this is almost like a third rail. We don't want to touch it. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. If libertarian candidates aren't ready to talk about our ideas in an uncomfortable situation, basically talk about the truth, the ugly truth, how are they going to be prepared to deal with a pretty lie, in a sense? And what I mean by that is, okay, age of consent, there are some things that can be talked about there, and say, look, there are some inconsistencies here. There are some issues where, innocent people do run afoul of a law that maybe shouldn't be, and we should have that conversation. But so if we can't have that conversation, if we're not able to deal with it, then how are we going to deal when the media or when the duopoly comes out and they distort one of our positions, and like when they say these guys are isolationist and they don't want to have anything to do with, some other country, when it really is, we're non-interventionist. We don't want to intervene. We don't want our government to intervene in other countries. Like, how are we going to be any more prepared to deal with a distortion of our views when we can't deal with the reality of our views, the truth of our views?
Yeah.
So I think that a quick answer to this, if we're going to stick to where we started, I think that for Mr. Victor himself with the age of consent issue, I think he came out, clearly addressed it. Like, when he first said it, you're kind of like, oh, okay. Right. But then when you read to me, he completely cleared it up. Like, okay, we're good here. So you know what we need to do? Shut up. Like, okay, Bingo. It's done. It's Bingo. Done. We've addressed this. Why do we keep having to have this conversation? And that's what I mean by shut up and silence our side. I don't feel like, no, we already had it. Right. Or it's like what Hector was saying was, it's going to be so big that we're never really going to come to an agreement of this.
Right.
So to keep focusing on that gets us nowhere.
I mean, I agree with you on the shut up part, because what should have happened, in my opinion, is every time somebody brought it up, somebody should have dropped the link and said, he already addressed that. Go watch it.
Done.
We don't need to talk about it because he already addressed it. And the way that he addressed it was solid. He gave a solid libertarian response, and it's reasonable. And, normal people, like not libertarians, normal people, they have, they can be persuaded with this argument. It's not a crazy argument that he made. So therefore, here's the link. We're moving on. We're not discussing it anymore.
Right. Yep.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I always posited there are three actions to take. silence, lean in, or walk it back, right? So what Mark Victor did at the beginning was actually kind of was explain himself, but it was really walking it back. Uh, and whenever you do that, it's or in other words, walk it back. It also means throw yourself under the bus or throw somebody under the bus.
Mhm.
And if you're not leaning in, and if you're not being quiet about it, the actual default is you're going to throw somebody under the bus.
Mhm.
So if he has to explain it in a way that he's defensive, he was already showing that kind of vulnerability.
Right.
And the same was true with, I didn't like how the party put out a statement about it. I didn't like how, because it basically, when you have to explain it like that, it just looks bad. So there's nothing bad about talking about age of consent. What is the issue? What is the problem of it is that, again, there are other issues that are far more important right now in society, and to people that matter, that you should be getting into. And at the end of the day, people who attacked him on it, by the way, and when I mean attack him, I mean this is, when you're a public figure like he is, and for people who don't know who Mark Victor is, for almost 20 years he has been a go-to attorney in the freedom movement, for that with a very expansive repertoire of cases that he has fought successfully, to expand and protect liberties,
Mhm.
and to have people use their expansive platform to criticize him to the extent that they did, uh, is going about trying to hurt him personally. So when I take if people wonder why I take umption, right? When I see the situation and I get upset and I'm looking at this and people ask, why are you so upset? I say, because you're literally trying to destroy libertarians, people who have a track record longer than you have. So when I and I think this is something we have to be able to defend one another, because
Mhm.
you know what, the Republicans and Democrats are going to do all they can anyway to tear us down. What the biggest thing I've observed in the last couple of weeks is, and even in this case, campaign, is how people are so willing to tear each other apart for the slightest mistakes, or yeah, and without reason, and without talking to one another. I'll tell you, I've been threatened myself. I've been ridiculed. I've been commented that I'm some kind of plant, that I have an agenda, basically,
Right.
that has nothing to do with the Libertarian Party or the expanding the movement. But of course they forget that, when you give up time, you give up energy, patience, funding, because I'm putting in time that otherwise, I take away from my own business, from my own family, and people don't either recognize that, and actually they belittle it really when, and they belittle the sacrifices other candidates put in when they do that. And for the most part, I don't begrudge Mark Victor for stepping out of the campaign. He was clearly in a situation where he was in a he had reached the level of the price he was willing to pay to stay on the ballot, um, he caved under pressure. I know Larry Sharp was very critical of Mark Victor, that basically he caved and sacrificed everyone's, the idea of having this one of the rare opportunities that you have, a libertarian get so far as he had on an election. Uh, and they're both right. I mean, ultimately, Mark Victor has to act for himself. Larry Sharp knows that candidates get a lot of support and goodwill from libertarians everywhere, and to see what happened, Mark Victor did under pressure, was disappointing. And certainly the open criticism against him was disappointing as well. But ultimately, let's not. We have to understand that we're trailblazing here. What Tubb's doing with me on the slate, what Dennis Missigoy is doing, what Frank Kraft is doing running for Congress,
Mhm.
what Joe Hanush is doing running for Congress in Florida, what other candidates in Florida are doing, just stepping up, particularly the guys in Duval County with you guys. You're Everyone has opened themselves up to a level of criticism just because they're libertarian, not because not because of their racial background, or their beliefs, or if they're religious. No, the problem is always going to be these people that that we're not an R or a D, and so we're automatically the enemy and distrusted. And
Right.
that is something we always have to overcome. I believe that ultimately we are my hero is always going to be Ron Paul, not because he was able to accomplish anything legislatively, but because he was the guy who stood there and said, "This is wrong, and here's why, and this is what we should do about it." And he said it for so long that everything he said has essentially come to pass, and that he predicted. And then the whole Ron Paul was right meme is because he was and is right. So libertarians, at the very least, we have a premium. Where do we succeed? We have a premium of truth telling again. We know we're right. We know the media does not want us to have a voice, does not want our message to resonate, because they know that the attention that they have from voters, from the general public, is so fragile, and they're out there to truly not misinform but disinform, that this is the fight we have on our hands, this information war, but this is the premium that we have. This is our superpower, and we cannot let it go. That's me on my soapbox. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are an hour and a half, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. You guys don't have any final words, and I can just wrap it up. Are we good?
I'm good.
Hector, you good?
Yeah, I'm good. You want to drop some deets, Tub?
Details. What
what do you got coming up real quick, and so we can
go ahead,
get you guys out of here.
All the campaign stuff that we have going on.
Well, I'll tell you, this weekend is CannaFest in Mount Dora at Reddingers. All weekend, you can check it out. You can check me out. I'll be speaking on a panel on Sunday. You can always find us. We'll find me in the campaign at Roos for Florida on all socials. Roos for Florida, and of course Tub's always doing something. It's always exciting to watch Tub on the trail. And of course, we're also supporting all these great candidates that are in the Jacksonville area. So Tub, take it away.
Okay. So I recently dipped out of CannaFest. I'm going to do Porch Fest here in town, which is a great opportunity to reach some people that would be really open to the liberty movement. So I kind of focus on that. But I get to focus on the gubernatorial race and the local city council race at the same time. Other than that, like I said, you can always find me not on Twitter because I don't want to camp out in y'all's horrible little Twitter world. But you can find me at Tub for Jacks on Facebook, and then tubforjacks.com for the website.
Awesome. Oh, where am I?
Wrong one.
Yeah, wrong one, right? Let me, how do you get me on here?
It's your show.
I know, right?
If you want me to close it out today. All right, there you go. All right, there you go.
How about that? There we go. All right. All right, everybody. I want to thank you for watching. Real quick, I will try to get that episode put up and put out the one that I wanted to do yesterday. That's where I'm going to finish up with my review of all the candidates that are running in the United States and compare that against all of I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for. Comparing the candidates against the number of delegates that each state was able to send to our national party. The idea, of course, just kind of trying to get an idea and put some sort of foundation for me to compare against. So I'm going to try to get that out. I had an unfortunate technical issue yesterday, so I wasn't able to. Tomorrow, if things go well, I should have a pre-recording for Frank Kraft, which I believe Hector mentioned a moment ago. So I'm actually traveling a little bit later. I'll be traveling to go visit some family, and I'm going to try to get him on to have a pre-recorded episode. So I'm going to try to get at least one more in. If there's any candidates out there that want to try to get in next week, somebody that that hasn't been on the show, let them know. We'll try to make it happen. I've got Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday open. And then I did take off on November 8th. So I am going to be running a live stream. I'll probably actually do a couple of different live streams. I don't know that there's going to be enough information that I can pull together to make a meaningful live stream like all day long. So what I'll probably do is do a couple hours here, a couple hours there, just kind of come back in and check in. So I'll probably do maybe 2 or 3 different episodes where I come in and I say, all right, let's talk about some libertarian candidates. Let's see how they're doing in these different states, and let's see what's going on. So look forward to that. Otherwise, I do want to thank you for watching. That is all for right now. You can find other episodes at libertydad.com. You can also find the archived video episodes at youtube.libertydad.com. And you can connect with me, Liberty Dad, on Facebook or Liberty Dad Pod on Twitter, where I spend most of my time arguing and fighting and wading through the cesspool of nonsense. But that's where I am. Or you can just email me, libertydadpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great day. Catch you next time. And we are